This is Abe Friedtanzer from Awards Buzz, and I'm very excited to be speaking with Brian T about expats. How are you, Brian?
I'm good. How are you, Abe?
Good, good. I'm sure it's nice to be in a low-profile project like this, playing the
Yeah,
spouse of an unknown up-and-coming actress.
sure. Yes, very low key, very chill in that factor of yes, the actress that I played opposite of is very unknown to the world of everything and in our industry. You know what's funny, Abe? I was talking to a buddy of mine, and they're putting it into context for me who Nicole was, like I didn't already know. Um, but they said you can probably pick out any human in any continent. Like if you dropped into Africa or Antarctica and picked out just a stranger and said, "Do you know who Nicole Kidman is?" Chances are they would say yes. And it doesn't matter what generation or anything like that. And there are very few people on the planet that you can actually say like their name and they would be known. And so that perspective kind of gave me this, oh my gosh, yes. It is kind of beyond and outworldly, definitely to be in the same scenes, in the same vein, in the same character, sharing these intimate moments with someone such as Nicole Kidman.
She also clearly loves to do television. She's done The Undoing and Big Little Lies recently. It's not just something she's trying, after doing all these films, is that this is clearly a space and a storytelling style that she enjoys.
No question. And she's crushing it. Her and Pear have and Blossom have been doing some amazing things and award-winning things. And this is just one of them. And I feel like, they really dedicate themselves into telling really good stories in a very prolific way, but also allowing the creatives to do their thing. I think that's one of the great things about that company, Nick and Pear, is that they really find these wonderful stories, attach themselves to extremely talented creatives, and let them go. And that's what she did with Lulu. She literally said, "You can do whatever you want. Here you go. If you want me to be in it, if you don't want me to be in it, it's really up to you." Um, and she let it fly. And Lulu again is one of those amazing artists, extremely talented, of course, but a genius to her own right to completely take this book into a different spectrum, into a different medium, flip it on its head a little bit by still keeping the integrity, but yet creating something as profound as we've seen in Expats.
Were you familiar with the book before signing on?
I wasn't familiar. As soon as I signed on, I immediately got it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Janice did an incredible job, a wonderful piece. And what I find so interesting is that thematically it all kind of evolves within this world, but yet Lulu completely changed it, whether it was the cast of characters or who was with who in the show that we've actually created was something that I felt extremely dynamic yet so wonderfully necessary to the story, to putting it on its feet in the medium in which we did. And I think it was that brilliance that really kind of turned the tide from book to television series for sure.
What can you say about working with the rest of the cast?
I love them all. I mean, I hope it doesn't sound cliche, but it is like a piece of my family, especially on this show, because I think we went so incredibly deep as far as the work is concerned, and you can't not give yourself over as far as finding your hearts with one another, your souls with one another, and sharing these intimate moments. You innately get closer. And I feel like for myself, Clark's character was all about the family and keeping the family together. So as far as myself was concerned, I spent a lot of time with the kids. We went to everywhere in Hong Kong that we could. We ate every day together. We took day trips together with the kids and their families. So I actually miss them the most. It was a really good time in Hong Kong, for sure.
And how did filming in Hong Kong set the tone for this particular story and influence it?
I feel like Hong Kong was such an impactful I think situation especially, I think when any production is done outside of your comfort zone, outside of your home, I think to answer the last question also, you innately come together because that's all you really know as far as the cast and crew is concerned. But Hong Kong, I've never been before, and I discovered this whole other world that I completely fell in love with. I think the energy, the people, of course, the food, and I feel like you feel that in our show. You really feel the essence of Hong Kong and what that means. And for myself, visiting there, working there, I was also felt like an expat, right? I always like everything was at an arm's length. So I literally took that into the emotions of Clark as well. Though he had been there longer, I really used some of those feelings that I had, or even some certain tendencies as an expat going into a foreign land that I had, especially through Clark and what he was going through as far as the story was concerned.
And the story does deal a lot with trauma, especially involving children. Were there any safeguards that you or others set just to sort of protect yourselves during this filming process?
I don't know if there were any safeguards. I feel like the biggest safeguard, especially between Nick and I, was just this complete utter trust with one another. And that was very much established, I feel like, through our first meeting. Um, but especially on our first day of set, we had to give over to that trust and give over to one another. And I don't know if it was planned this way, but our very first scene together ever on camera acting was a scene in the night market when we're sitting on the curb immediately after we found out Gus was missing. And they set up cameras and we just went for it. There was crying and screaming and yelling and giving our souls to one another for the very first time. And Nick and I talked to each other after and said that might have been the greatest thing to happen for us as characters and also for us as actors moving forward, because now everything after that, I mean, we literally, it was like this sonic boom. We created 25, 30 years of history together because of how much we enveloped in each other's process and souls, and created that particular trust to move forward. So I feel like that's why you see our characters with that sense of chemistry, but that also that love that is innate. Because I don't ever feel like in the story or the journey of all of our episodes that you feel that Clark and Margaret are ever going to separate. I think they take certain paths, definitely, but it's always a struggle to try to keep the family together. And I think that's the beautiful thing about our story and our relationship, especially in Expats, is really trying to hold it all together. And I think most shows you see a lot of these situations and the parents splitting apart. Though we've taken separate paths, I feel like these two are always trying to come back together, one holding one another in completely different episodes. And I think that's the beautiful thing of this relationship.
I also imagine that filming a 6 episode limited series in Hong Kong is substantially different than working for, a handful of seasons on a procedural drama set in Chicago. What is it like
Definitely.
transitioning from one to the other?
Time, the allowance of time, I think, to really delve into the characters. I also think there's an elevated level to expats that a procedural show can't quite get into as far as the character, because it's more about the plot of it all. Whereas Expats is a very character-driven drama, though plot is obviously embedded into it. It's what these characters are going through in that context. And with the advent of time and the different kind of filmmaking that we're allowed to do on expats, just really gives this kind of elevated prestige type of stature that we all love watching. And nothing against the procedural shows. I love them, and they're there to do exactly. And I was with one for 8 seasons. But I think this is an artistic piece, a very cinematic experience. And I think that's just the biggest difference between the two mediums. And I wouldn't, they're part of the same medium, but between the two television series.
Well, looking back at your list of credits, I did find a show that I feel like inhabits a space in between, but I also don't think people really remember too much, and that's the Crash TV series that lasted
Yes.
for 2 seasons, which
Yeah.
came at like a sort of strange time when the film might have been better regarded than it is, now in some ways. But do you have any reflections from working on that show?
I love that show. Glenn Mazzara was a showrunner, and I still talk to Glenn to this day. I have a few friends from that television series, and I enjoyed it. We shot in Albuquerque. We were there for a while. We all banded together, very similar to Expats in that sense. And what I loved about it was, yeah, I think it's that happy medium. I think it was not necessarily a procedural space, but not also like this cinematic experience, right? I think you got the best of, I would say, the both worlds in that show. Um, so that was I love that experience about it because I think the writing was just so amazing, especially in season one. And to be able to bring this sense of artistry and in our show, the sense of grittiness along with it was something that, I was really itching to be a part of for sure.
Are there any other roles from your, past that you hold especially dear that you wish people would ask you about in moments like this?
It's funny, as an artist, as an actor, there's always these goals, right? But as I've matured in my life and in the career, it's really about the experiences. And I've been very fortunate to have a lot of amazing experiences. And I can name so many that I thoroughly just enjoyed being a part of. And it wasn't necessarily because of the content or how it was perceived. It was more about the people, really. And, I can name them across the board from like the features that I did from Fast and the Furious to the Wolverine. Jurassic was an amazing adventure. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was another amazing one. Two television series, obviously, I've been on Chicago Med to Expats to Crash, which was another great one. But even some certain, guest stars starting out in my career were really fun and enjoyable because the people made it fun and enjoyable. Um, Grey's Anatomy was an amazing experience. Now I'm like going through my laundry list of credits, which is probably not the best thing to do at this time. Um, but
All
I
good.
but I really kind of have settled into appreciating and embracing the experience more than, what the outcome may bring. And if the outcome is great and people enjoy it, obviously like expats, and it becomes, somewhat of a prestige elevated series that is in the conversation, that's just bonus. But the experience itself and the friendships that I've made is something that will stand the test of time for sure.
Well, I want to end by asking what you're watching, what you have seen recently that you think is
Ooh,
particularly awards worthy, like a show or a performance.
um, Shogun. I just finished Shogun maybe a week or two ago, and the obviously the series is amazing, but the writing, as far as the cinematic experience, as far as the depth of authenticity, and I know this like firsthand of what Hiroyuki Sanada has brought, um, to me is also just an incredibly elevated television series. Very similar to ours. I mean, a completely different as far as genres is concerned, time periods and all this other stuff. But there's this elevated essence to it that Lulu has brought. And I know all the creatives that on Shogun has brought that I thoroughly enjoy because you can tell such magnificent story, right? Especially when you bring that caliber of work and then elevate it to this kind of cinematic experience. I think that's the best kind of hand in hand that you can actually go through to really make some fantastic television. So hats off to everyone over at Shogun and Hideyuki. I know he had his hands in it as well. I think he's listed as an EP or a producer. I'm not sure which, but um, I know he took great meticulous pride in that because I worked with Hideyuki on the Wolverine, and I'm going to take my time to shout out to Hideyuki. A lot of people share stories that aren't necessarily the best of stories. And I know if we're running out of time, I apologize. But real quickly, we're doing the
We're good.
Wolverine. We're doing a 5 day shoot in Japan at a temple, and it's the Wolverine. So we're at a funeral, but all hell breaks loose, right? There's guns and people running all around, this and the other. But it was 120 in humidity at the time, and everyone was in just black suits because we're at a funeral. And the extras there just gave it their all, right? They're all Japanese extras. We're shooting in Japan. It was a 5 day shoot, and at the 5th day, everyone's clapping and rejoicing because we wrapped, we did it. And Hideyuki stood at the front where people would come in and come out. And as all the extras were exiting, he stood there for an extra 2.5, maybe 3 hours, and shook everyone's hand, thanked them, gave them their time. Um, and that's something I'll remember forever, and something that I hope to be able to do someday, to really kind of epitomize his class and personify who he is as a human being and what it really means, right? Because we're all doing this and playing this wonderful art, but it's really about the humanity and connection. And so that's why I love that show. I love sharing that story, and hopefully I can emulate him one day.
I think that's a wonderful sentiment. Thank you so much, Brian. Such a pleasure to look at your career, talk about the great
Thank you.
Hiroyuki Sanada, and look forward to seeing what you do next.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.